Hi, friends. I'm Heather Miller, CEO and founder of social impact startup Grasshopper, talent acquisition and DEI specialist, mom of 2 humans and 3 fur babies, most under 4, former professional ballet and hip hop dancer, yoga teacher, interior designer, caregiver, provider, retirement planner, innovator, social connector, and the list goes on. As you can tell from my bio, I've always taken drive to the extreme, and for the most part, done pretty well juggling all of my hats. However, I say this on behalf of most of us, the past 3 years have been very challenging. My personal experience included moving to an unknown city, the unexpected death of my mother, and the birth of my first child 2 weeks later, launching a startup during maternity leave, the pandemic, building diversity strategies for a global corporation in the wake of George Floyd's death, another baby, and then, the icing on the cake, a layoff. I felt like I was approaching a midlife crisis with no space to do so. As a result, I've been thinking about balance and whether that's actually a thing. Join me as I speak with some amazing thought leaders and women in my life to understand how they keep the fire going and the lights on while staying sane. We'll explore drive, juggling priorities, taking no prisoners with your schedule, love and sickness, pursuing your dreams, enjoying the journey, and figuring out what is right for you. We hope these conversations help you err on the side of midlife epiphany versus midlife crisis. Welcome to Balanceness. Kathleen, welcome to Balanceness. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I always kind of start with how we know each other. And you're my boss lady. You're like my work wife.
Yeah, no, I was, Heather and I worked together, at a consulting company for how many years?
So I guess, officially kind of a year and
Yeah.
a half-ish
Yep.
in my last role. But before that, we were kind of, let's say, liaising on the same team.
Yes. So, so we worked together and had so much fun working together on a daily basis. And, I miss seeing you every day for sure, but it's nice to see you here.
I know. So, let's have you introduce yourself. And since we're talking about balance, like include all of yourselves, which
Okay.
I always just list a couple of things here to help you out here. So like a careerist, partner, mom, sister, all the good, soccer player,
Okay.
everything.
Okay. So Joy, like say I'm Kathleen O'Malley and
yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Kathleen O'Malley. I'm based in Chicago. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago in Geneva, Illinois, my favorite town. And I am a mom to 8-year-old twins. I'm a wife. I am one of 4 that, grew up in Geneva together. Full-time working mom. Try to stay really active. We are always the ones, our friends are always telling us, like, you guys never have time to get together because you're always doing something. You're always busy. We like to stay very busy and active on the weekends. I grew up playing soccer, dance. I played the piano growing up. I love live music. I actually just came from Nashville this weekend, listening to some country music. I am a very loyal friend and fierce friend to, my friends I have going back to being 5, 6 years old all the way up to college. Went to college at Illinois State. Been in the talent acquisition field for over 20 years. And also just recently started a blog about a huge piece of my life. As you know, my husband and I struggled with infertility for a number of years, and fortunately, after some big struggles, ended up getting pregnant with twins through a fertility center in Colorado who are 8. And I was also diagnosed with breast cancer 2 days after having those babies. And so went through breast cancer treatment, chemotherapy, was bald as a Q-tip for a year, and had a double mastectomy reconstruction, and now a very, very strong advocate for breast cancer awareness, and work also in an organization that helps mentor other women going through breast cancer. It's a super cool organization that partners people that have a very similar background with those going through it. And so you can just be an extra friend to them as they're going through. And that's a big part of my life as well.
That's so wonderful.
Oh, and a dog mommy.
Oh,
Can't forget
that's
Riley.
great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We have a boxer who surprisingly has the same birthday as both myself and the twins. We were all born on the same day, which is insane.
That's great. And you travel a lot. I know you just mentioned Nashville, but there's never a weekend where I think you sit still.
Yeah, I don't sit still. I love to travel. My kids now have the travel bug. We love to do stuff outside. We love to be, hiking or going for adventures outside. We went to Smoky Mountains last year. We're planning to do Costa Rica next summer, which is very exciting. We go to the Cape every year. My husband's from the Boston area, so we're always heading over to somewhere on the East Coast as well. But yeah, I love to travel. And we're also planning, my niece is going to be teaching English in Spain. She just left yesterday. So I'm planning to visit her sometime this year over in Spain. And yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So what does balance mean to you, since the title of this podcast is Balanceness?
Yeah, I think it's probably the hardest thing to achieve in life as an adult, let alone a mom and a wife and a working parent, all of those things. I think balance is the hardest thing. And it's something that I don't know that I have achieved balance. I think it's something that I may never fully achieve, but I think striving to get to a balance that works for me. I am a firm believer that it's almost the mentality of, you kind of have with the airplane, you have to put your oxygen mask on yourself before your kids. And I think in order to be a good wife and a good mom and a good friend and a good colleague and all of those things, you have to take care of yourself first. So it's very hard to do that. And I have been working a lot at the power of saying no to things. So that I can help achieve some of that balance. And I think it's through things like, having time for myself, which could be, for me, I love to go shopping. I love yoga. I love just honestly sometimes driving around with the music on really loud on a nice day. And so taking those moments for yourself, so that you can come back and give your full self to your family is something that I strive for sure. Yeah.
I'm glad you have reasonable expectations around balance, and actually most people that I've been interviewing on the podcast do, because it is so, I think you set yourself up for failure if you think that this perfect image of balance. Actually, our last podcast, guest said stacked rocks on the beach. And I love that metaphor, because it's just, it's impossible to think of actually getting there and setting yourself up for failure if you think you will. But also I love that you just mentioned finding the little moments and mentioning just driving around in the car. Actually, I rarely get to have when is there an hour that I can carve out myself with two little babies? So I was just driving in the car today, and I was listening to a podcast, and I was like, this is the best. This is the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just identifying those little moments, but it's so true. It's something that I talk to my therapist about often is prioritizing you, even when you think that you can't or you shouldn't, because you're not your best self if you're just totally depleted.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that, it's hard to sometimes notice when we need that, when we're kind of feeling that overwhelming amount of, I know for me personally, we just started sports with the kids as well. So now I have another thing to add on, which means travel soccer and travel hockey. And my husband's also works full time, but his schedule is very early in the morning and to very late at night. So that's one more thing that falls on me. Not that he doesn't help, but it's certainly a lot of the days that working from home there, it's easier to kind of, grab a call from the car and, have the kids in tow. So I do think that it's also as a working parent, working mom, I've always felt it's very important for my daughter, especially to see a working mom, but it's hard to feel that balance of picking them up after school and they want to go play on the playground, but mom has to get back on a conference call. So it's really hard to toe that line, but I do believe it's really important for them to see that.
I totally agree. I've mentioned this before, but my mom did not work as we were growing up. And I think it would have just exposed me to a totally different model had she worked. And so I think it's really important for my kids, and especially because I am working at home, they don't, they're so young that they recognize that dad leaves every day and goes to work. And so they are just now saying oh, mom, you're working, but you're working from home. And so it's always important for me to make sure that they know what I do on a basis. And just for kids to listen to that they are not everything. Although you may feel that way, they are not everything. Your parents have a life, they have a social life, they have work, they have priorities. So
yeah, no, I totally agree. I get it with the working from home. And, I have a separate phone for work that's red. And the kids know when mommy's on her red phone, it's like, that means business. It's like she's on her phone, that it's also
it's like the sock on the door.
I know for sure. Yeah, totally. So I think that also they recognize that they have to be, when that's on, they have to be quiet or they have to wait. We've set very clear boundaries of unless it's an emergency. And that's what's an emergency? It's if there is something impaling you right now and you need help, you can interrupt me. But otherwise, you have to wait till I'm off the call. Yeah, for sure. But I think there's also a social media aspect of it that's really difficult because no one's putting out there on social media today was the worst day. My kids were being a-holes. I was, had the worst day at work and I have a headache and blah, blah, blah. Everyone's oh, they have the perfect family and everyone's, my husband's the best or my wife's the best or this and that. And it's good to see those things, but it also creates a false sense of reality of really what is happening behind closed doors. And I know we all have those people that we see their social media and we're like, yeah, that's not really what it's like in real life. So I think it's just keeping that, really truly keeping that balance of you have to keep yourself in a good headspace. And if you get to the point where you're not, I've always said this, the key is to get yourself out of that. If you can get out of that, then you're okay.
SOS. Yeah. And we're going to talk about that a bit later because I want to ask you more about, changing mindsets. But I think I am now probably the person aside from you who has studied your blog the most. So you described yourself as that person who everything happens to. And I'm thinking about the blog entry where I think you were traveling and you came down with a virus where you couldn't move your legs. How horrifying. But why do you think you are that person?
I don't know. And we have to laugh and when those things happen because it's always the only you. This could only happen to you. And, it's always been like that. It's not just been since I was, an adult, but There's always just been like those, when you see the like little percentages on the medicine, or it says like 3% can have that. We're always like, let's talk about the 3% because I don't know. It just happens to me. I don't know if I'm just prone to that stuff. I mean, I'm definitely klutzy and I'm definitely like, those kind of things. But yeah, I don't know. It's just everything that could possibly happen. It does. And some of it's good. I mean, unfortunately, I haven't been the like win the lottery, kind of person yet, which hopefully
Right.
that's
We got
that's
to
what
turn
this
this
all,
around. We got
yeah,
to
it's coming. It's coming.
come.
But yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I think I'm very I take risks and I think I'm always open. Like I'm always the person like who wants to try this? Who wants to go?
I know you always put up your
That's
hand
me.
for like
Yeah.
more, more, more. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe that's why. Maybe it's the universe telling me to slow down a little bit, but I'm not sure.
So we're going to talk about sickness, faith, coping mechanisms in the
hmm
context of balance, because I think that sickness can redefine you and change your perspective. Certainly it
Yeah.
has for me. Um, and it changes your perspective on what you welcome into your life and what you don't. So just like you were talking about, like
hmm
actually saying no. So the things that you can just say, you know what? I don't need that. I'm gonna
Yeah.
opt out. Um,
Yep.
but I wanted to start with faith because it seems like it's played a big part in your life.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because it hasn't in mine. I know I'm a
hmm
spiritual person, but not really a religious person for many different reasons. But
hmm
um, faith, I think is a big part of yours. So
Yeah.
what shaped your faith and what are your earliest memories of being connected to it?
Yeah. It's such an interesting question to me because I have had my own journey with my faith that is very different than I think what probably a lot of people might think it is externally. We were the family that growing up, every Sunday without fail, my mother would dress us in our Sunday best, and we were in one of the, first, second, or third rows in church was not an option. And I hated going to church on Sundays, like most kids do. I was like, ugh, like we have to go, and it's so boring. And it was, I grew up Catholic, so it was the up, sitting, standing, kneeling, reciting the prayers. We grew up in a relatively small town, so yeah, we knew everybody there. Everybody knew, so it was just kind of like another sort of check in the box for the week, but it was just our normal. My mother was very religious. My mother was, you know, we she taught us from a early age, prayers and things along those um ways. Like, we obviously said like our prayers before eating and our prayers before bed and things like that, but she led catechism groups and she was very active in the church and things like that. So she was, I think, from a very early age showing me how important it was to her. When my mother got sick, she put all of her faith, and my mother died of breast cancer in 1989. When she was sick, there was never a moment where she felt she was not going to be okay. And even conversations I've had with my dad in the last few years, he has said the same thing. My mom never thought that she was going to die. And she would say to my dad, Jesus would never take me away from four kids. And I just have all my faith in God that I will be healed. And she prayed the rosary and the whole nine yards. Now, when my mother was sick, I was middle school age. And so many girls at that age, I think are not the nicest and, kind of rebelling against our parents and trying to find ourselves. And I was angry. I was really angry at that time. And, after my mother passed away, it only got worse because that point I was feeling, if you're so great, why did you take my mom? And, I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to actually like going through getting your confirmation as one of the sacraments. I did not want to get confirmed. I mean, I was fights with my dad about like, nope, I'm not doing it. I don't want to be a Catholic. I don't believe in God. I don't, all of these things. So I kind of fell away from the church for a long time. Um, we still had to go, and my dad's rule was under our roof, you go to church every Sunday. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes I would, say I was going and then sneak out the back, with some of my friends. But um I think I went in and out throughout college. It wasn't a huge part of my life, but definitely felt more and more as I was getting older. Um, that faith was coming back. I wouldn't necessarily go to church every Sunday, but there were times when I felt the need to. And as I've gotten older, I have felt more that church necessarily to me isn't the building. It's that feeling and the things that you do to honor your relationship with God throughout Sunday or whatever day that is. And so, if I fast forward to when my husband and I were going through IVF, there were times when I was doing the begging and the pleading, like if you do this, if you give me a baby, I will go to church every Sunday. If we get pregnant, but then that would also flip and I would get very angry again. But there were a lot of times, I think, towards the end of that when I created more of a healthy relationship. And it was, I remember distinctly like falling on my knees and just praying, like with everything I had, like, please let this work. It wasn't a plead to, if you do this, it was, I know that I'm supposed to be a mom. Like, please, show me the way, give me the strength, like those kind of things versus give this to me. I was asking for guidance, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think once I shifted that mentality to not just saying the prayers as I did when I was younger, I learned every prayer, the act of contrition, all of these things, but they never really meant anything to me. And now to this day, even like when I fly on a plane, I say the Hail Mary when I'm taking off in my head. And if you really listen to the words that you're saying, um, you're just asking for grace and you're asking for, you know, to put your hands in their hands. And so I think going through cancer is when it really became apparent to me. I was terrified, of course, but I was furious and had worked so hard to get those babies and then to be told that could all be taken away from you. Um, my dad tells the story even too of, leaving the room when we found out I had cancer and going outside and looking up at the sky and yelling, "How could you do this?" Because there's that immediate want to blame somebody. You want to blame, why did this happen to me? How could you let this happen? And I talk about this in my blog where I called somebody that I knew very well who grew up a different religion than I did, but was very religious. And I called her and I said, "I'm so mad. I don't know how I can believe in God. I don't know how I can, put my faith in his hands when he would give me this." And her simple answer was, "He's saving you. He's not the one that gave you this. He's saving your life. He's helping you back on the track." And a lot of people believe that's the work of the devil or like all these things. I'm not at that level, but I shifted to slowly being able to little things give me, and sometimes out loud, "God, please give me the strength to get through this treatment," or give me the strength to be able to take a picture with my child today, because that was very hard for me to do.
Yeah.
Um, I fell away from going to church every day or every Sunday, but I can tell you the distinct moment when I came back. And I was at church with my sister. I was holding the twins. She begged and begged and begged, "Please come with me, please come with me." And I just couldn't go. And there's a song called "Here I Am, Lord." And it's just basically, it's a really pretty song, but you'll hear in a lot of Sunday services. And the tears just started flowing. And it was almost like, I just got chills thinking about it, because it was almost like, now I'm here. Like now I'm letting myself, know that you didn't do this to me, that you were saving me. And that now I have a very, very, very different relationship with God. And it's more about like a friend, if that makes sense. And I'd never had that before. It's about like, talking to God, helping for, help me find the answer to this, or please give me the strength for this, or please, this and that, just help me, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does, but I do have a question on, and I
Yeah.
read this in your blog, and then you just brought
Yeah.
it up, that he's saving you. Help me understand that perspective, and then I have like a second follow-up
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
actual prayer. Yeah.
So, I mean, I really believe that I've always believed everything happens for a reason. And when I think about, when I went through my IVF treatment, for instance, I had my mother dying of cancer in 89 meant from breast cancer, I had to start mammograms very early, and I had had them diligently since I was in my early 30s. And I had had a mammogram about 11, maybe 12, no more than 12 months before I had the babies, and there
Yeah,
was
because you're not
nothing
supposed to
there.
have it while you're pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do feel that, when I felt the lump in my breast for the first time was December, and I had the babies in January. And at that time, when your milk comes in or there's all these changes in your body, you just feel like that's what's supposed to happen, right? And so I do feel that, if I wouldn't have gone through what I did, my cancer was so aggressive and so fast moving that I may not have caught it, and I may not be here. I do believe that, asking, God to save me, what means is like, I do believe some of that is changing your mentality, putting yourself in the right headspace, allowing others to help you. I wanted to do it all myself. I don't believe that in my mind. I don't believe that God gave me cancer. I believe that for whatever reason, and some of it may be showing up now, I was given cancer to help others. I do believe that. And I think that's what I mean when saying like he saved me. I don't believe he like chooses who he saves and who he doesn't, but I believe that he helped me get to the point to understand that there's a greater reason behind this.
Now I understand. And then my second question was around the function of prayer. And you just mentioned that like the begging and pleading. And
Yeah.
even though I don't have a strong faith, I have found myself in situations like before big auditions or this happened the other night. I actually found myself in a very conflicted situation, and I reached out to my mother, who, as you know, passed away several years ago from breast cancer. And it was the first time, like, I actually caught myself. I was like, holy cow, like, I can't believe
Yeah.
I'm, laying in bed, sort of like talking to her and sort of begging and pleading. And then the next day I was kind of shocked with myself, surprised with myself. And then I went to the place where it's like, oh, well, this is a very selfish, this is like a one way, like I'm begging and pleading. I don't think this is what you're supposed to do with prayer. And then you just kind of mentioned more of that like friendship, but how is that asking been thought of in your traditions?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you bring that up because I actually went to a women's group last year with some of my very best friends, and quite honestly, I didn't know what it was. And it was like a whole weekend about learning about faith and learning how to be closer to God. And that was a very uncomfortable topic for me. When I talk about that, because it's been a very private thing, I think, for me. Like, I don't think a lot of people, when they think of Kathleen O'Malley, think of her as this like staunch Catholic and like goes to church, or like, I just don't think they do. And that's okay. But I also was like thinking, when you go, you think of people that go to these prayer retreats and go to do all these that are like total, like opposite end of the spectrum. It almost was odd to me to be that connected to your faith. And so I was a little uncomfortable when we went to this weekend, but I was like, I'm going to just try it. I'm going to do my best. And out of that weekend came a whole different way of understanding. To your point, growing up, I thought prayer was saying the Our Father and saying the Hail Mary and saying a very structured prayer. But what I've learned is that it's just having a conversation, and it's super awkward and weird when you first start doing it because you feel like you're like well, who the heck am I talking to? Or who? And, there's times now in the car when I talk out loud and there's no one in the car and it's just me and probably people are driving like, who's this weird person talking to? But I will just talk and just in my head have conversations about like, this is so frustrating. And it doesn't have to be, oh, thy God, this powerful. Like that was part of it too. I was like, how do I do that? And so many people don't know how to pray. They don't know, including myself. I'm still learning. So I think it's just, also feeling okay with what feels okay for you.
Yeah.
Like I have no problem if I'm like, this is, like I was like, well, I can't say like this is effing wrong because it's God. Yeah, I can. Like there's no reason. Like, or, letting, God know that I'm like really not okay with this and I'm mad about this and that like letting it out. Um, and, you will start to see, I think, like little changes in yourself or some of that. My biggest thing is help me release this. Like, give
I
me
like that.
direction, help me find the way to, feel okay with this, or give me give me some, people always look for signs. They're like, if you're real, like send an owl to my window
Right.
right now, like that kind
Yeah.
of thing. That's to me
An
not what it's
owl.
about. Yeah, like it's got to be, oh, that's then they're not real. And I would do that too. I remember when my mom passed, I would say, look for, give me, if you're there's really a heaven, if you're really there, like send me a sign and nothing would happen. Or
Yeah.
sometimes, you'd see like the light flicker and you'd be like, oh, okay, she's here.
Yep. For my
So I think
sister, it's a
yeah,
robin, like a red robin, a robin red robin.
yeah,
My mother's name is
yeah.
Robin, but I've got this little hummingbird outside my window. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that.
Yeah. So I think it's just getting comfortable with what's comfortable for you. But at the beginning, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
At the beginning, it's really weird. And we're raising our children Catholic,
Right.
but I consider myself more spiritual than a
Yeah.
Catholic. I'm spiritual over Catholic. And we don't go to church every Sunday, but we always do something to connect our family. And that can be our church, and like, um, like I love the Maren Morris song, My Church, where she's like, her church is listening to country music and singing with the windows open,
Yeah.
and like, I think it can be that. And so I think I think faith for a lot of people goes up and down. Um, Living with, I'm NED, so I'm no evidence of disease versus in remission, if you will.
Okay. Okay.
There's still days every day where I'm like praying, please don't let me live to see my children, grow and things like that. But that's just something that, each person I think will always deal with that when you go through any type of major trauma. Um, but I just think it's getting to little pieces of what you feel comfortable with and then taking it a little bit further and then a little bit further. And um, whatever your version of that is, it can't hurt. And that's the thing I learned. Like, it's not going to hurt me if I try something new in my prayer, if I try to, lean on God for something else that I haven't before.
Mhm. So, do you mind if you just expound a little bit on your infertility journey and
Sure.
the cancer diagnosis? I have to say, although
Yeah.
when as you and I got to know each other, you would sort of tell me stories here and there, but
Hmm.
then just putting the full thing together after reading your book
Yeah.
is just like every entry, I was like, no, make it stop. Not that it was just like it's so much for one person to handle.
Hmm.
And anyone who's been through trauma, a lot of people talk about the threes. Like it's always like for me,
Yeah.
it was I think like my grandmother's death, another death, and then
Yeah.
ex-partner's death. Like it always sort of comes in threes, but I think you have
Yeah.
way more than three traumas.
Yeah.
So maybe just give our audience here a little color on that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think like so many people we'll start with infertility. I think it's something that, you don't think about. If you are a, sexually active adult and you're not ready to have a child, you spend majority of your adulthood trying not to get pregnant until you're ready, right? And then when it's like you're ready, you just think it's going to happen. And until I didn't realize that my mother had had fertility issues because I was 12 when she passed. My sister, my older sister, has 4 kids, never had a miscarriage. My younger sister hadn't had any children yet, and my brother doesn't have any kids. So, and all my friends around me, nobody had had issues, nobody had problems. I mean, there were a few, of course, that struggled, but none that I think, I have one good friend who struggled and did end up getting pregnant, has 3 beautiful children now. But majority of people, like, it just wasn't something that was really talked about. And so, we got pregnant right away, and the struggle started right away. It literally, from the very first pregnancy. So I had 4 pregnancies before the twins that didn't result in babies or live births. And so I think it's such a challenge on relationship. I mean, the fact that we were newlyweds and right off the bat, we started dealing with this, what was really tough. And there was a lot of blame. There was a lot of guilt. I was a little older. I got married at, now I don't think it's as much, but a lot of people, tend to get married late 20s, early 30s. I was a little bit younger or a little older, sorry, when we started. And so there was that guilt of, we should have gotten married younger. I should have had babies younger, all of those things. There was a lot of blame put on my husband. What, you waited too long to marry me, and now I can't have babies. But we did learn to lean on each other in a different way than we hadn't before. And surprisingly, we didn't go through couples counseling or anything through all of our IVF. And I'm really proud of us. We leaned on our friends. I think we did a good job of, like, knowing when we needed to take a time out, when there was, like, so much focus on it, because it's very methodical and very, like, you have to do things at this time, and, all of that. So,
yeah,
he was really a huge support, physically going through it and my body going through it. He just was amazing, my husband, going through that together, and it very easily could have gone the other direction and ruined us.
Yeah.
I think that it's also, my advice would be, anybody that's going through IVF is to really look for somebody else that you trust that can give you the advice on what worked for them and where to find the right doctor. That is the key for us. We wasted a lot of time going to a local IVF clinic that was not the right fit for us. And I know a lot of people who have gotten pregnant from that place, but we felt very much like a cattle call. We felt like it wasn't individualized. They made some really wrong decisions that were not great for us. And so when it was, in our hands and we had to make the decision on, we're going to pay for this now out of pocket, we wanted the best, and we wanted the best in the country. And that's why we went where we did. So I think that that's the key, is it's not a one size fits all. A lot of people think that. You have to have a doctor that's going to be individualized on what your specific circumstance is, and somebody that's going to be a partner with you the whole step of the way, and not just like a phone call once a week.
Right. But it's really hard to know, and it's hard to know what the fit is. And I'm speaking from experience, because I also went through IVF for both of my kids, and I know what that does for relationships. And the cattle call thing is, even though what's interesting is, right off the bat, I connected with a friend who had some successful pregnancies from a specific clinic in New York, after, like, a very harrowing journey also. And so, although I did have to make the choice. Like, I was like, I know people who have had success here, but it definitely wasn't something where, like, it wasn't very handholdy. I had to advocate for myself along that journey. it was like, oh, well, here, give yourself the needles and here's a YouTube video. And
Yeah. Oh
like,
gosh. Yeah.
and the cattle call thing. I mean, there were hundreds of people in that clinic every time I went in um for my test. And it's really hard
Yeah.
to think like that you're getting individualized treatments when
Yeah.
you're in there. But you
Yeah.
also you have to make choices.
Yep.
And for us, it was like this, we've seen success here. Um,
Yep.
but it's also you do have to advocate for yourself. Like I remember certain things going wrong or something being off, and I'm not someone who's very outspoken. Like I'll never
Hmm.
send a food dish back, but
Yeah.
like it was like I remember just saying like I don't think that this nurse did this at the right time. I think it's impacting me. I think that I
Hmm.
don't like this decision that she's making, and just calling that out with the doctor. And um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's all I'll say. It was like a time where I really needed to stand up for myself, but
Yeah.
you don't know unless you've been through it, right?
And that's exactly right. And I think it's so hard for a lot of people that have never been, we don't know any different. When you're going
Ah,
through it, you think you're putting your body and your future in the hands of these doctors that are the specialists. So you
ah,
don't know. And then when you see, like when we saw the other doctor, like when we went to that, we were like, oh my God, that was night and day. I mean, from the very first meeting we had until the transfer. It was just night and day. But again, you wouldn't know that. And I think it's hard for a lot of women to, even though, we are where we are, I think it's still hard for a lot of people to talk about it. They don't talk about infertility. They don't talk about going through IVF. I think just if you're comfortable with it, like that was something for me. Like my boss knew I was going through it. And there were days when I would literally be like, I just need a day off. And there was no questions asked. It was just if you can have those people in your corner, it doesn't have to be anybody you work with, but just somebody that knows, what you're going through, and it's okay to take those pauses and those timeouts. And when you're going through it, it's like, you want to get it done as fast as you can and
yeah.
get that baby. But letting the process take the time to make sure that it's going the way it should be and not rush it, even though it's so hard.
It's
It's
so
so hard.
hard
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
scientific. It feels, I
Yes.
remember for my partner, it was really hard um to think of any of it as like a
Yeah.
natural process.
Yeah.
They were these like petri babies, right? So
Yeah.
every part of the process just like really irked him. Like he just couldn't see this as it was meant to be, because
Yeah.
it wasn't meant to be. Like we had to work hard to make it happen. So in that
Yeah.
sense, and he grew up Catholic. I think it really challenged his
Oh, sure.
faith in process and how things were supposed to be.
Yeah, that was really interesting too, because the rest of some of the family members and certainly some friends that, didn't agree with how we were doing our process. And, of course, I've been very open, like having to have DNCs, which, sadly now in some of our states would not be able to happen. And, and I've talked to people that have very different opinions with regards to like politics and all of those things, and explaining to them, why this is so important to me with some of those issues, because I wouldn't have physically had my children right here. So I think there's that piece of it too. And it's still, when you think about the my kids are 8, so the things that they've done now I mean, you literally can choose like
Oh yeah.
color of eyes and hair and all. I mean, it's
I think
just
they asked us, they were like, do you
insane.
want an Olympic swimmer?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy what
So,
they
I mean, that's crazy. And I can't imagine like how it will go years from now. But yeah, I mean it is very, very scientific, and all the decisions that go into it are really tough ones. I mean, we had the situation after where I couldn't carry another child. So we had 6 embryos left, and I think those are some really difficult decisions that you have to make in your life. And those are the only ones that you, and if you're with a partner, can make. And you have to be like okay with making those decisions. And it's easy to say like not care what other people think, but you know, you have to kind of be comfortable with like it's your decision. It's
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's even harder when you're both not on the same page about
Yes.
that decision.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so post your cancer diagnosis, you talk
Yeah.
about just I can't even imagine, but your descent into depression and
Yeah.
you're pulling away from the kids, which I
Hmm.
imagine is, you know, a very natural coping mechanism. Um,
Yeah.
but then you decided to seek inpatient help. And I'm curious about the tools that you learned that set you up to fight for your life. Like you talk about in your blog, like a very sort of defining moment where things sort of turned around for you and you were like, okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I mean, I have suffered from bouts with anxiety and depression off and on through my life. And so I've been on medication more than half my life and learned throughout different periods how to you know, kind of rise up out of that. And I think, you know, I mentioned this earlier, like the key has always been for me, like if you have a couple days where you're like, I just want to stay in bed and watch some movies and, you know, you're just feeling down or, you know, whatever that is, it's okay to have those days, but the key is if you can't get up, you know, if you're kind of stuck there. And um, the level of I guess it was depression, but I was just distraught. I couldn't stop crying. I was physically couldn't get out of bed. I hadn't even started my treatment. I just was so unbelievably overwhelmed. And I had just delivered children. So I had the postpartum thing going on, I'm sure too. Um, and all of these thoughts going through your head, you know, of like, oh my God, you know, like they told me it was very aggressive and that, you know, it was by the time we got the diagnosis to when I started my chemo, like how much it had grown in just that small period of time was terrifying. So I think it was just, I was dealing with all the emotions finally coming out of like, you know, when you go through IVF and you have the baby, I think until you hold that child in your hands, you don't believe it's real.
great.
And so I think I held on to this crazy anxiety. I did not enjoy being pregnant because I was terrified the whole time.
My
You know,
sister
if I
and I
couldn't
talk
feel
about that
them,
all the
yeah.
time, where
I
we
mean,
were both had the same experience.
yeah. So
Like
you know, I mean, until you physically see that child, it wasn't real. I was waiting for the shoe to drop. You know, I was waiting for them to say something happened or you know. So I think it was like, like that exhale of like finally that came out and then got knocked right back down again. And so um, I just knew that I was in a really bad spot. I didn't, you know, and I'm very open about talking. I wasn't suicidal. I wasn't, um, you know, to the point where like I, you know, felt like I was going to die. Um, I just could not. I just wanted to crawl in a hole. The best way I can describe it is like curl up in a ball and be in a hole. And when I was sleeping, I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't have to talk about it. I was just, it wasn't happening. And the second I'd opened my eyes, it was all happening. And it's that fear of like going through chemo, losing your hair. How am I going to do this? We were exhausted, you know, all of these things. And so
having twins, like
having twins,
babies to take care of. Yeah.
yeah. And you know, I think it was just too much for one person to physically or emotionally handle. And I think I had a breakdown. I know I had a breakdown. I just could not stop crying. And pulling away from the kids, you know, I remember, you know, my sister and my dad and my sister-in-law, and a lot of people, my in-laws, everybody was there. Take a picture. Do you want a picture? And I did not want any pictures of the kids. And the reason for that, which now I know, was because I knew looking back on those pictures, I would be able to feel that pain. like looking at the pictures, I could know exactly what I was thinking.
It's
And
evident.
yes. And everybody does those beautiful newborn photos and has everybody come over in the families and all that. And they arranged for a family friend who's a beautiful photographer, and she came and they literally made me do it. And, I'm in like a ponytail and like, I just was like, did not want to do it. And I look at those pictures now and it hurts to look at them still because I know the pain I was in, but I'm so grateful we have them at the same point. So I have very, 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 very few pictures of me with the babies the first probably 3 weeks where I just did not, there's tons of them, but there's none of me. And now I kind of am like, oh, I wish I would have done it. I wish I would have had more pictures, but whatever. The ones that I have are very hard to look at. So I felt myself pulling away from them because I didn't want to get close to them in fear of losing them, if that made sense.
Right.
So now we always had people around us. We had an army of people that literally were like helping while we were going to treatment. We had a night nurse. We had all these people. So we had people all the time. And so there was always somebody who doesn't want to hold a baby, right? So there's like always somebody around wanting to hold the twins. And they would be like, oh, is it okay if I hold her? And I'd be like, or him or whatever. Yeah, yeah. So I just, not that I didn't hold them, but I just had this like wall up where I wasn't ready to like fully love them, if that makes sense.
Totally.
So, when I knew that I was at that point, I was like, I need help. I can't do this alone. And so, we went to the hospital. They asked all the questions they have to ask, and they immediately admitted me. And, it was very intense. It was not like you see in the movies. It's not, like it's not a great place to be. And, there's no doors on the window. There are no doors on the rooms. There's no mirrors. I mean, you think about all the things. I rolled up in sweatpants and they made me take my sweatpant drawstring off because you can't have anything with a rope. Things like that. So it got real pretty quick. I think when I was in there, but I was in the right place, and it was intensive round the clock treatment with, why are you feeling this way? Let's talk about this. Like, what's the worst that could happen if you hold your baby?
Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen if what's the worst that could happen is you don't make it through treatment and you die. It was that point blank. But, but if you do, here's all the cool things that could happen. And so it was really just sort of like trying to shift that mindset. And, I use the image of taking a bite of the sandwich because before I left, I stopped. I couldn't eat. I was so nauseous and sick that I just couldn't eat anything. And my sister came up and she's like, just take a bite of the sandwich. And I was like, I can't. I'm so sick. I can't eat anything. And then I remember sitting at a lunch in the facility and they gave us like turkey cheese sandwiches. And I was like looking at the sandwich and I was like, all right, I have to make a choice. I'm either going to take a bite of the sandwich or not. And I took a bite of the sandwich. And that sounds so silly, but that was like,
Doesn't sound silly.
it was like the turning moment where it was like, I almost saw the light at the end of the tunnel here. Like, okay, I can do this. I can fight. I'm going to, give it 150%. I have the people around me. And just for whatever reason, it was just that shift in the mindset that like, you can do this. It was almost like too much for one person to think about all of this and how am I going to do all of this? So I'm just going to shut down. But then when we broke it down into like little chunks, then it became a little bit more doable.
Yeah.
So
What is the worst that could happen is something that like my therapist uses all the time.
yeah.
I'm curious if mindfulness was ever brought to the table as a tool. I know that it is now for a lot of cancer patients and survivors. Was it anything you
Yeah. I don't, at that point, no. At that point, it was really more, I mean, when I say baby steps, it was literally, I mean, like, okay, you're not feeling like you can eat the whole sandwich. Let's have a cracker. Like it was like that baby step of a type thing. But I think it was also, they were encouraging me to start journaling. They were encouraging me to, if I didn't feel comfortable talking to my husband or my sister or whatever, find somebody that I could talk to. You know, talking back to what we talked about earlier, like finding me time. So within the madness of everything that was going on, find a time during the day to go for a walk by myself and so I mean, mindfulness in that sense, they weren't
Yeah.
using mindfulness, but taking the time to center yourself and put yourself into the right headspace so that you can start to chip away at those little things.
Yeah.
And so that was something that, they would check in on me. What did you do today? What was your thing you did today? And, some days it was, watching a show that I loved or, whatever. But walks were a big thing. I went on a lot of walks where I would just like go for a walk around, 2 blocks, get some fresh air, really think about like breathing, getting some sunshine, and then, coming back.
I do
So
that too. Yeah.
yeah.
It's really helpful.
And I think it was like, when I think about how I believe everything happened for a reason, I think in a sense, like that had to happen to get me in the right mindset to start chemo and to fight because that was so hard. I think that like this was almost like, let's just knock everything down and then like now you're ready to go, because I don't think I would have been going into it with like that fighting spirit that I had without completely falling apart.
I get that. So you said that there were tons of friends, family around. What do they do for your coping toolkit? Like what is helpful and not helpful when someone is going through this? About it from your perspective and then also from somebody who supports people going through it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on every person. And I know that's like the canned answer, but I think people ask me that all the time. I have a friend going through starting chemo. What can I get them? And I'll go back and say, just ask them, like try not, everyone thinks a blanket or food. Oh my God. We joked about like we had lasagna and enchiladas coming out of our freezer. But that's everybody's inclination is to just, you want to help and you want to make food. So what we did is my sister actually like took that over because we had so many people. What can I do? What can I do? Like people would be like, can I come to chemo and paint your nails? And I'd be like, no, like, I love you. No, like, I don't really want anyone there. I just want to like chill with, do my thing. And, what kind of food do you want? Well, when you're going through chemo, everything tastes like metal. So you don't want anything, So people kept asking. And so what we did is we actually, my thought was, what, we don't, need anything. What we'd love for you to do is like, we're going to walk. Susan G. Komen had been very important to me because of the support they gave my mother growing up. So I said, I would love for us to raise enough for 3 women to get the BRCA test, which is a big piece of my story. Which should, in my opinion, be a free blood test, but whatever. So let's raise enough money for 3 women to get the BRCA test and all walk together. And so it went like gangbusters. We ended up raising over $50,000 and we had about 100 people at the walk.
Viral Kickstarter.
Yeah, it was amazing. So that was a way for people to help and we were helping other people. And so I think it was just like, for me, that was cool to see that outpouring of love and support through that. And then, to see everybody show up that day. I had to do this press thing and then we came out and they were all standing there and there was like 100 people and we were all doing the walk and it was a rainy, crappy day and they all came still, so I think it just depends on the person. So I think it's okay to just say like, what do you need? What would you like? Do you want, hey, do you have a comfy blanket for chemo? If not, can I send you one? Or, something like that. people would send me like Sudoku puzzles and I hate Sudoku. So I would be like donating them to the other people. Um,
No,
so yeah,
actually, it's hard. I've been going through this with a friend as well, and I need to ask my therapist. Like, there's just such a fear of offending or saying the wrong
yeah,
thing.
yep.
But I think your answer is right. Like, just ask the person.
Yeah, just ask them. And then,
Tell you.
from my side of it, I unfortunately have had other people go through where I've been in that position. What do I do? What do I do? And like I have a friend right now whose daughter's going through cancer, and um I told her very early on, like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be annoying to you, and I'm just going to check in and I'm going to see how you're doing. And you don't have to ever respond, but I just want you to know that I'm thinking about you. So I'll send her a message at least once a week and just be like, I'm just thinking of you with a heart, or like, is there anything you need? And I've asked before, like, do you want me to bring a bottle of wine and we will sit and drink it together tonight? Or, like something like that. Um, but I think it's also hard for some people. I did have some people, unfortunately, that just couldn't deal with it. And a lot of the people that had known me my whole life, it was harder for. Some of my friends that were with me younger, that grew up with me, that were there when my mother passed away, and it was really hard for them. My best friend basically moved in with us and was there around the clock. And so she was, um, just a complete blessing and able, I don't know how we would have done it without her, because she was there literally 24/7 for months. And um, I think there's also, like I said, it's okay when you're the person that's going through it to give other people grace, as weird as it sounds, to have some space, because I had one friend in particular was like, I just can't see you like this. I can't. And I was like, that's okay. That's all right. It'd be better for me to know that than for you to come up and sit on my couch and cry for 2 hours and make me feel terrible about, my bald head. So I think that's okay too. But it happens a lot where people just sort of like disappear, and they just can't deal with it. And that's unfortunate, but that happens too.
Yeah.
So be ready for that.
Yeah. How are you thinking about work as you were recovering and surviving, and
Yeah.
how, like, has work um been in the grand scheme of balance for you?
Yeah. Um, well, I think when I first came back, I was starting at a new company, because the company that I worked for was a very small startup, and they needed to replace, they just couldn't go without having anybody, not having anyone there. So I went on leave for a year.
Does that
And
mean
so
you
when
lost your healthcare?
I'm trying to think back there. No, we had healthcare through my husband's company at the time. Yes, that's a good question, because I'm like, he worked for a really good company and I was at a startup. So thankfully we had healthcare through him.
Oh,
Because otherwise I wouldn't have been insured. So yeah, that's a great question. So I didn't want to come back. So like, long story short is, like, my hair was still growing in, and it was like this horrible mullet curly situation. And so I really pushed on not coming into the office because I was clearly growing it out,
yeah.
and I didn't want to be the new girl with cancer, or that had just gotten through cancer. I wanted to build my own based on my work that I did and not on people feeling sorry for me.
Yeah.
So I didn't spend a lot of time in the office in the beginning, and it was people, it's not a common, like, oh, like, so have you ever had cancer? Like, it doesn't ever come up, but somehow somebody in the Chicago office found out about it. Because of the work we did with Komen, with Susan G. Komen, there was a lot of press around it. So like, I was in Parents Magazine and a bunch of these different, where they interviewed us to get, more, the word spread out more about the race. And somebody found out about it and they were like, is this you? And they said, and I was like, well, yeah. And somebody at the time was going through cancer in the Chicago office. And so they asked me if they could connect me with her. And so then it kind of just like spread. Somebody must have put it up on our you know, internal database. And so it's almost a weird feeling. You almost have like a survivor's guilt when you go through the other side of it, when you've seen, it's not embarrassing. I don't want to say that's the word, but again, in business, I wanted to do what I could do and not be because I had cancer. So I kind of like hid it down for a while. And then like even with you and I, like eventually it would come out and somebody would say something and you'd catch this like look like this and they'd be like, wait a minute. And then I would say like, well, I went through breast cancer 8 years ago or something like that. Um, so I've never wanted to lean on it. However, externally, like I'm a huge advocate for it. So it's like being involved in different organizations and speaking about it. And, you know, in October every year, I post something, a statistic every day on my social media, just to help raise awareness. But I think that there's still a lot of people, quite honestly, that have no idea that that I work with every day.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on the person. I think if I would have gone through the treatment while I was at my current company, it would have been very different.
Yeah.
Because I think people would have, clearly found out about it.
Yeah. And now you wear so many hats. You're working, you're a manager, you're a mom of two, you're
Yeah.
like you said, hockey mom.
Yeah.
And in your blog, you talk about never wanting to miss anything and wanting to live
Yeah.
life to the fullest. How do you juggle everything that's on your plate right now and keep yourself healthy? And are there
Yeah.
moments where you just want to dump everything that's on that plate?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's really, really hard. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, first off, like single parents, my hat goes off to you because I don't know how people do that by themselves because parenting is the hardest job I believe you will ever have.
Agreed.
So I think there's that in itself, but um, I think that I have done a better job creating boundaries, especially with my full-time job. Um, I, had no problem, I think, working till the kids, would be home from after school care. Then I also had done a good job for a long time. About 6 to 8 was like my hands off. That was my time from like with my kids making dinner. We were very protective of that as a family. We put our phones down. And then if I had to jump back on at 8 o'clock, I would when they go to bed. Um, Now it's a little harder because now we have, 5 days a week sports after school, plus we have travel and games on Saturdays and Sundays. So we joke, my husband and I, that we're like two ships crossing. We just ran into this last week for the first time where he was out of town and I had to have both of them in completely opposite spaces at the same time. And so that's what I'm saying. Single parents, I don't know how you do it, but I
Yeah.
think that you need to create you need your people. You need to find your people. And that's one extra thing that we're still getting through. We just changed schools for the kids this year. So we're still kind of finding our people. Um, they're slowly coming around. And, I think that that is an important and powerful thing to find. I'm slowly getting to know Sean's hockey, my son is his hockey family. And like, we ran into this last week and they overheard and they're like, okay, we will take him home. You take her wherever you need to go. We got him. We're a family now, so I think finding that is key. And I think that comes, all my friends that said, wait till they're like 7, 8, 9 years old and you get into sports or dance or whatever it is, it's going to become crazy. And we're there. We're crazy. But I kind of, in a weird, sick way, thrive on the craziness because it's fun.
Yeah.
Like, it's like there are days when I legit feel like an Uber driver and I'm going from here to there to there. I also don't have any problem at work saying I'm a working mom. And, if I need to be on a call in the phone, taking a call from the car, that's what I'm going to do. And there's never been a problem getting my work done. So I think it's just calling that out and being in an environment that supports that is important. My blog is something that has been so incredibly cathartic. and has been something I've been wanting to do for a long time. And, we were a little slow in the spring, so I was able to kind of focus on that a little bit. And that is something that, another thing, to add on now. So I think just leaning on other people and leaning on where you can say no to things, which is hard for me, but like learning how to say no and still finding time, to hop on the Peloton or move your body once a day. It's incredibly hard. And cook and clean and do, it's like it's never ending. But I don't have a right answer for it. I think the best thing I can say is you do the best that you can. And when you have those days when you're ready to throw up your hands and be like, we're quitting everything and, whatever, that's okay. Have a glass of wine and then start over tomorrow,
Yeah. Yeah. One of our podcast guests recently said, well, like adjust your time frame. It's all about an average. So if one day is incredibly different, the next day is
Yeah.
less so. Like think about it as an average. Like how are you doing it? Keeping your head above water on average.
Yeah. And I think like listening to yourself and, for us, our kids, like we know that when our kids, we call it a chill out day, and we have days where we're like, on the weekends where we just stay in our pajamas and we watch TV and eat pizza and just chill out. And we do that. And they need that. And I need that, And I think the other thing that my husband and I are really, really passionate about is protecting our time with our friends. I am like, I have an annual girls trip that I will always do. We've been doing it for years, and it's just laughing and being silly and laughing till your stomach hurts every day and complaining about our husbands and all the things and whatever, for a few days. And he does the same with his guys. They go on a football game. They go to a different football stadium every year. And people will always say like, God, you guys are traveling all the time and you guys are always doing this. And I just got back from Nashville this weekend, but we know that that's important to each of us to have that time, and it makes us more, I think, appreciative of each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we do that. And that doesn't work for everybody, but that works for us.
Yeah. One last question, and sorry to end on, well, we'll end on a less serious note, but this is
okay.
a more serious question. But how do you manage your anxiety around like sickness and the future?
Yeah, it's really hard. That's the honest answer. And there are days when it's really hard. I think I have to go see my doctor every 6 months. And, it's interesting that you asked that because I'm writing my next blog that I'm writing right now is about the first treatment. And these last two have been really hard to write because it brings me right back there and it causes anxiety. And, every single time I go into the waiting room where I have to go for my checkup, it's the same place that I went in to get my infusions. And so, it causes, you look around and I see other women that are in their beanies and their scarves and they're frail and they're, all these things. And it just brings you right back there. And I think that I'm still a work in progress, to be honest with you. When my doctor said it'll be about a year before it's in your rearview mirror, they were pretty spot on. So that was, 2016 was about July 1st, 2016, when I was 1 year. Okay. And I think you have to be able to like lean into those feelings when you're having them. And like, I'm a big talker, I get it out. I'm talking about like how I'll call someone, I'll talk to my husband, whatever it is, and then try to let it go. And that's the hardest part. I get a headache and I'm like, oh, I have brain tumor, it's back, I'm dying. It's just like, I don't know that will ever go away. But what I am trying to do, and I think it's really been, it's funny because I had this last girls trip. One of my best friends was saying this to me, like, I want you to just really start to learn to just, let go of it as best you can and start just living your life. Like you can't worry that that other shoe's going to drop because you could walk outside tomorrow and, get hit by a car. I mean, it's so true. So I think that it's towing the line of like being aware that I have to be a little bit more careful. I have to keep my body strong and I have to eat healthy and all the things that I do. But also not like obsessing about it, and like it's also very easy to go, like my husband always says, like, you just want to like do it all. You want to go to Disney World, get a second dog, like do all these things because you're afraid you won't be here in the long run, but we still have to like be realistic about these things. So I think it's just learning to live in the present, and that is the hardest thing to do. So I'm working at it, but I think it's getting better, and I think I'm very I don't think about it every day, which is a big progress. It used to be kind of an incessant thought all of the time. So it's a work in progress.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of like grieving. It's always
Yeah.
somebody once said and for those who can't see this, but like I'm touching the front of my head, like at the beginning, it's always there. It's like at the front. And then
Yes.
at some point it sort of starts moving to the back of your mind, the back of your brain,
Yes.
and it's not
Yeah.
there at
Yeah.
the waking moment. Yeah.
And I think about too, I mean, the last thing I'll say on that is, when I came out, I had connected with a lot of women in the community that were like fighting at the same time I was, or whatever that their journey was. And I was looking for work at that time. And I was like, well, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. Maybe I'll go work for Susan G. Komen, or maybe I'll try to get a job at, these other organizations. And the more I was going that direction, my husband was not excited about that. And he was like, I think you need to take some space and separate, because we have been 365, like really all about breast cancer, and like didn't want to go on the walk the next year. It was too hard for him to go. And at the time, I was like, well, I just won. I just beat this. I want to, get other people, on the same page that I am. And I want to give back and all these things.
Yeah.
And that was probably the best thing I could do, was to step away from it,
Yeah.
because it was so all encompassing.
And it's not your whole identity. Right.
Yes.
So you have to develop those other parts of your identity that had that sort of had to go into remission, quote unquote.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to play a quick game here called Yin or Yang. It's kind of a would you rather. Okay. So first question, red Gatorade or Smart Water?
Oh God, Smart Water all day. Red Gatorade was the Gatorade I drank. You stinker. Yeah, no way. I still to this day, I can't drink red Gatorade. Nope.
Oh my God. Okay, so do you prefer stuffing your proverbial plate or leaving some room for other things?
Leaving some room.
Leaving some room. And finally, Annette, you just started talking about your birthday. So I'm not sure what sign you are. I'm terrible at this, but
No, it's okay.
City life or beach life?
Oh, beach.
Beach. What's your sign?
I'm a Capricorn. I'm on the cusp.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my dream, would live in a beach town.
Yeah.
Perhaps in Costa Rica someday.
Perhaps. Scheming.
Yeah.
Like I said, we've got that second house.
Yeah.
Well, it's been so nice having you.
You too.
And
this has been great.
What a treat to get to talk to you for a full hour and 45 minutes.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
But love you. And
you too. You too. Thanks, Heather.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for supporting another episode of Grasshopper's Balanceness podcast. If you liked it, please rate, review, and subscribe on our Apple and Spotify pages. Send me a screenshot at hello@grasshopper.com. That's GRASSHOPPER HER, to enter yourself into this episode's surprise raffle. And be the first to hear about upcoming episodes and events by signing up for Grasshopper's newsletter, which can be found on our website.